So this Lent, our worship series is on the 7 last words of Jesus from the cross, each word being a phrase that Jesus uttered with his last breath before he died. Not the last word he spoke, for we believe Jesus still speaks, but the last word of his singular bodily human form. And for centuries, Christians have meditated upon these last words, believing there is potency in what he spoke in his last hour, so full of suffering and so marked by the end. We aren't told what his first words of his earthly life were, but it was likely the word im or imah, the Hebrew or Aramaic word for mama. Sorry, dads, but it was probably im, ma. Maybe he said this, imah, as he reached up to her and wrapped his arms around her neck, and when Mary lifted him up with an embrace, smelling the crown of his head as he snuggled into her. Have you smelled a baby's head lately? I mean, one that's your own, or your grandchild, or do you remember that smell of your own children? It's heavenly. And I imagine that as she nursed Jesus, Mary smelled him and cherished him, awestruck in beholding the mystery of his life emerging from her body. She was the one he first trusted and who cared for him, protected him in his vulnerability, fed him from her body, nudged him out of her nest to stretch and grow into the boy and eventually the man he would become. Imah. That might have been the first word he spoke from the cradle for a mother who would have given her life for him had he not required something even more of her, which was to behold him giving his life for everyone else. That is a sorrow deeper than I can imagine. I spoke with Lynn and Paul Raymeyer this week to see how they were after the funeral of their beloved 53-year-old daughter-in-law, Marty, the wife of their son and the mother of their 2 grandchildren. And Paul said to me, and I asked Paul for permission to share this, just so you know, and he was okay with it. Paul said to me, well, God didn't accept my deal with him to take me and leave Marty here with my family. The only thing worse than being tortured and executed on the cross, as Jesus was, would be to be the parent of one dying in such a way. Mary was there at the beginning when his form was pure, a new flower opening to a new world, holding him with joy. And Mary was there at the end when his form was broken and poured out for the sake of an old, weary, sinful world. And as Michelangelo's famous sculpture depicts, she was there at the end holding his body as well. She had been warned by Simeon, if you'll remember. She had been warned by the old man in the temple when she and Joseph had taken Jesus to be dedicated. And Simeon had said, "A sword, Mary, shall pierce your heart." The cross which carried her son must have been the sword that pierced her heart. And that son of hers was a remarkable human being. There from the cross with his dying breath, he first prayed for his executioners. That was his first word from the cross. To a prayer for his executioners, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." And then later, after some time passed, he spoke to the man crucified beside him, "Today you shall be with me in paradise." His second word from the cross. And then at some point in his dying agony, he was able to focus his attention enough on those huddled as close to him as they could get beneath the cross. Of all the people who knew and loved him, of all those who followed him around the countryside and listened to him preach and listened to him teach and watched him heal the sick, of all those who waved palm branches as he entered into Jerusalem and hailed him as the coming Messiah, John's gospel says that only 4 stayed. Only 4 had the strength, the capacity, the wherewithal to remain with him and endure with him to the end. Good old faithful Mary Magdalene was there. Mary, the wife of Cleopas, who was Jesus' aunt, was there. One of his beloved disciples was there. And Mary, his mother. With his last breaths, those were the 4 who surrounded him. Jesus gathers his focus upon them and his strength enough to say to his mother and his best friend, "Woman, behold thy son, behold your mother." And with these words, Jesus makes clear something that we witnessed him forging throughout his earthly life. When he was 12, you remember, his mother gets on his case for ditching them in Jerusalem, and he responds to her somewhat baffled, "Didn't you know I would be in my Father's house?" And later, when he's an adult and his mothers and brothers come because they fear he's getting himself into some serious trouble, which he is, because he's suggesting that he is the Messiah, Jesus says to those who have gathered, Who are my mother and my brothers? Whoever does the will of God in heaven, that is who my brother and my sisters and my mother are. We can imagine this too not being easy for Mary to hear, and could have been one of the edges of the sword piercing her heart as well. But it was critical to Jesus' mission and purpose. He was forging a new family and calling together a new community that transcended blood relations. So the 2 sacraments that we celebrate as a church, baptism and communion, extend this out to all of us. They are the symbolic gateways to this larger connectivity, so that in him, through the water and the blood, we all become siblings in God's family. Caroline, James, and all of us become Jesus' blood relatives, you see, siblings of God's family. Now, and then, we do not merely belong to our biological family, but to the family of Jesus Christ. We are the children of God. And that's what he's doing when he says, "Woman, behold thy son, behold thy mother." He removes himself from the equation and becomes the ground of a new relationship. The new covenant in his blood is the way we say it. He says basically, "You are all my blood relatives, all children of God. I die to reveal this and offer this reality to the world." And is there any doubt of the truth of this? Have we not learned yet how interconnected we all are? There are certainly vestiges of an old mentality that still sees race as separate, some superior, others inferior. There's a weary mentality that still wants to build walls to pretend we here are not connected to you over there. There's still a small mentality that sees our need to take care of ourselves here as distinct from you taking care of yourselves over there. A fearful mentality that will be better off circling the wagons and fending for ourselves. If the internet itself has not highlighted enough for us how globally interconnected we are, then this virus drives it home. A global pandemic is only possible because we are so profoundly and beautifully connected with one another in the human family. There is only one race, and that is the human race. And only one place, which is God's country, and that is this sacred little globe. And only one destiny for us, which is us bound together, heading to where we ultimately belong, however we get there, in God's arms. This was the Jesus movement, an expansion outward in ever-widening circles of love and care. Whenever people want to draw the circle narrower, which they often did and still do, Jesus broke it open and drew it wider. And whenever people wanted to pin him down, or should I say nail him down, it only makes him more elusive and embracing, with even pierced arms stretched wider to include that ever-widening human family. And so what becomes clear in this strange and scary time of a global pandemic is an interesting paradox. At a time when we must separate ourselves physically to arrest the movement of this virus, we become aware of how profoundly interconnected we are with one another. And if this is true physically, then how much more so mentally, psychologically, and spiritually? And if we as a church are to work at anything, it is to make this truth more a lived reality. Yes, of course, we take care of our families, but very quickly, that responsibility expands outward to the circle of our church family, which then very quickly expands out from there to our human family, and of course, our creaturely and creation family as well. That is the ever-expanding movement that is the real Jesus movement here in the 21st century. So let us take this time when the world is shutting down a bit and the harried, hectic pace of our lives is released, and the frenzy of the entertainment industry and the sports industry and Wall Street and travel industry and all of it that left a big fat foot on the gas pedal of our lives is released for a moment. And let us ask ourselves, who can we now see who we haven't seen in a while? Who can we reach out to that we haven't in a while? Who might we notice that we haven't noticed in a while? What is most essential that we've forgotten is so essential in our lives? And may even the fear of COVID-19 lead us towards a renewed dependence upon God and one another as we realize ultimately that nothing can separate us or the ones we love or all the human race from the love of God that was revealed in Jesus Christ on the cross, breaking down the boundaries of separation and saying to all, woman, behold your son, behold your mother. We are all children of God. Amen.